Okay, so last video I described, this way of understanding whether or not you ask this question: do physical objects exist independently of us? All right, Kant says no, right? But in a particular way. So he distinguishes between these objects, which do exist independently of us, and our appearance, the appearance we get of them, which is, that object in time and space with certain qualities. He's going to deny time and space exist independently of us. So he has a couple of different distinctions. So we're going to do transcendental realism. And now Kant is his transcendental idealism, right? Now transcendental, trans means across or change. And what transcendental means, it just means like you are changing and going above almost, right? So it implies some sort of difference between the input and the output, so the object and the appearance here. So transcendental idealism, some people argue, is a class of transcendental realism. So this is the claim. So transcendental realism is the claim that objects in space and time are things in of themselves. Right? So what is, again, in and of themselves just means that the object exists independently of us, right? We might have a certain perception of it, but it persists and it has certain properties that are not dependent on our perception. Empirical idealism. Now again, these are Kant's distinctions. Empirical idealism is that all we know for sure is the existence of our own minds. Right? So if, for instance, Descartes had just stopped that we were a thinking thing, he would be an empirical idealist. Now, of course, he didn't, but if he had, this is where he would fall. These get broken down in two ways. You got dogmatic, right? You got the dogmatic empirical idealist, and you have the problematic. That dogmatic here just means you're committed to a particular belief. It doesn't mean that you are like, it doesn't have the necessarily pejorative conception that it does now. So dogmatic idealism is that it's the claim that objects in space do not exist. All right, the problematic holds that they might exist, we just don't know. Okay? Now, again, this is a little nuanced of a distinction, but the transcendental idealist, that's what Kant is, doesn't deny the existence of objects. It denies the existence of time and space. It's a fine distinction, but that's what makes transcendental idealism not dogmatic idealism. So what's going on with transcendental idealism, which is again Kant's view? Okay, so do we know that objects exist outside of the mind? Yes. Okay, how? So we get in transcendental idealism nothing but representations, right? So we can, for now, this is fine. These are appearances, right? Nobody's gonna yell at you for this right now. So we get nothing but representations, which we know that, okay, so we know these representations through something called self-conscious awareness. So through self-conscious awareness, now this isn't self-conscious in like the way that like, oh, I don't like how my pants fit me, I'm self-conscious. It's not that. This is self-conscious in the sense that you're like consciously aware, like your conscious is aware of this, right? Self-consciously, you're attending to it. It's a current to you. Self-conscious awareness, right? And it's through this self-conscious awareness that you have, Kant says, immediate and certain knowledge of objects in space. Now, of course, this is a little, like this claim in space is a little wonky because space, strictly speaking, doesn't exist independently of us. But that's how we perceive of it. Like, we know it's there, we perceive of it in space. Okay? Now, to be clear here, like, it's through the self-conscious awareness of the representations that we get this immediate knowledge, right? Immediate and certain knowledge. So that's like Kant's answer to this question of like, do objects exist? Yes. How do we know? Okay, well, we have the representations and we are self-consciously aware of these representations, and that is immediate and certain, that constitutes immediate and certain knowledge of these objects. So what is an appearance? So appearances are not independent of the mind. Right, so they're just, this goes for all the different types of appearances that we're going to talk about. So they're not independent of the mind, and they exist partly through our experience of them. So like the particular appearance is the result of an experience we're having of it, at least in part. And there's some distinctions here. So he says that like there are things that exist outside of us. And what does that mean to exist outside of us? So that's broken down as well. Okay, so you have empirically external and just external, right? And empirically external is the things encountered in space. These are the actual objects. Okay, and external is appearance of the object to us. Okay, now, so what that means is, so if I'm looking at a can right now, and it's green. The can itself, right, that's empirically external. That is outside of me in a particular way, in that it is the thing actually in space. Whereas the fact that it's like green, that is external to me because that's a sensory, appearance, right? Now I get an appearance of that sensory appearance that's in my mind, right? And that's what I have access to. That's inside of, that's an inner sense thing. So that's the little distinction there. So another way to perceive of this is the physical properties of the thing versus, right, what the individual observer observes of the properties or perceives of the properties. But here's the thing. The use of perception here implies a particular process, so let's just stick to observe, right? The can's got particular properties, wavelengths, like particles that move in a particular way, their distance, the length of the waves that bounce off to produce a particular sensory experience within me, or sensory result in me, right? Observation. That's the physical properties. Those particles, there's space between them, the way it reflects light, those are physical properties. Versus what I, as the individual observer, observes of those properties. So I observe that this can is green, right? Because I'm not red-green colorblind, right? If I was red-green colorblind, I wouldn't perceive it as green. I'd perceive it as gray, right? So that's the distinction between, the things in space versus the appearance of the objects to us. And again, this is outside of us. We do also have like the inner sense, which is, internal to us. And that is also an appearance, right? So this is the empirical thing in of itself. And the empirical appearance of the thing, right? So the empirical thing in of itself is the thing with the physical properties, i.e. the can, versus the empirical appearance is what quality I as the observer pick up. But be careful here, because you might think that the way that the object appears and how, or appears to us, and how the object actually is the distinction here, and it's not, right? Because appearances in themselves, right, which again would be the mind, which would be the independent thing, like the thing that doesn't depend on the individual observer, right? So an appearance in and of itself is the thing that doesn't depend on the particular observer in question. They lack sensory features. So whatever is targeted by appearance in and of themselves wouldn't have sensory features, no taste, no smell, no color, no sound, right? So the upshot is that sense perception and appearances, what we have access to, are different. That's the upshot there. So we have the distinction between, clarify this distinction between the empirical thing in itself versus the empirical appearance versus appearance in and of the thing, right? The empirical thing is the can. The empirical appearance is the color of it as I understand it, as I perceive it. And the appearance in and of the thing is this stuff that is the acknowledgement that the properties that are being observed of this object are not in the appearance. So, strictly speaking, whatever sensory experience is the color green is not found in the appearance. What I get is the appearance of green. That's the distinction.